I'm so excited today to welcome a couple of folks from OC&C to the podcast. Welcome to Strategy Simplified. For both of you, would you mind providing a 1-minute overview of your journey up to joining OC&C, and specifically one thing that set the firm apart for you as you were deciding where you wanted to work?
Thanks so much for having us. I'm Isobel, Associate Consultant at OC&C in the New York office. How I got here, I grew up in the UK, went to high school there, and then moved to the US for college. So graduated from Columbia in 2021, majored in sustainable development, and joined OC&C later that summer. And for me, what sets OC&C apart, I think, primarily is its size. That stood out as something differentiating from other consulting firms in that we are still very much a global firm. We have offices around the world, headquartered in London, but also across other continents. But yet in the US, we're at about 100 people now. So it really does feel like it's a close environment of working with people who you get to know on a personal level as well as a professional level. And I really appreciate that. I'll hand over to Akshaan.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Akshaan. I am also an associate consultant at the New York office of OC&C, and I've been here a year now. I think sort of in my 4 years of college, I did a whole range of internships and jobs, most of which were actually in the think tank, research, and nonprofit world. But in my junior year, I did an internship at a development consulting firm called Dahlberg. And I think my experience there and sort of the feeling of making a tangible impact through project work, and also working in a team environment, which was something I really enjoyed, was the sort of experience that set me on the path of consulting, which really wasn't on my radar until very late in college. And that's what led me to OC&C. For the second part of the question, I think this is a realization that I had a few months into the job, actually, of what sets OC&C apart. And I think it's the perfect place for you if you are generally a very curious individual. Because I've been here a year now, and I've done 12 consulting engagements across B2B, TMT, consumer goods, leisure, and even the pro bono sector. And because our projects are quite a bit shorter, I think, than most of the other firms, we have the opportunity to really be exposed to a lot more industries and learn about challenges in different industries in a much shorter period of time. And I think that's something that I'm quite appreciative of, and I think that sets the firm apart.
Love it. Amazing. Well, I will specify as we go forward which question is for which one of y'all, but just in general, obviously very impressive backgrounds. Thank you for sharing those. And I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more as we chat. So Akshaan, let's talk with you first. For OC&C, you mentioned this focus on strategy projects and shorter projects. And you might have already touched on it a little bit, but I just want you to dive into it a little bit more deeply. One of the questions that we often get is, what is strategy consulting to you and to OC&C? And I'll just preface that by saying that strategy consulting is a very cool buzzword. It's what everyone says they do, but sometimes it means different things to different people. And so if you could help us define that. And then secondly, what are a couple of advantages, one or two advantages that you think of for that type of work as an analyst that you wouldn't maybe have if you weren't doing strategy consulting work?
Of course. I know that we at OC&C like to describe ourselves as a pure play strategy consulting firm. Every year, our founder.
What's an impure play? That's what you got to tell us.
That's I guess it's what you were saying. Everyone likes to say that, use the word strategy consulting, but often doesn't mean purely strategy consulting. But I guess what that definitionally means is that we're laser focused on answering interesting, high level, cerebral sort of questions. And we work very intimately with executives and management teams at the client's firm to find the right answer to those questions. We don't do any implementation work at all. And for example, the scope of one of the recent projects I did was to determine if the merger of two firms would like generate revenue synergies, and just in a broad sense, if that merger was a good idea from a strategic sense. And answering that question is where our scope ends. We wouldn't really do any of the implementation of that merger or anything beyond that point. For me as an analyst, I think the two biggest advantages are, the first is, we never really travel to client sites for projects. And I really enjoy that because it allows me to enjoy the office environment and interact with, friends and colleagues who are on different projects and people at the firm who are working on different things. And I also just love being in the city and at home and being able to explore, more of the city. And the second big advantage, it's quite similar to what I had mentioned earlier about what sets the firm apart, is that we do shorter projects. Our strategy projects tend to be, I think, 1 to 2 months. And it just gives you the opportunity to work on more things and learn and absorb a lot more things in a quicker period of time.
Love it. I'm just taking notes. There may be things I come back and talk about in a little bit. So that was great and awesome. Helpful also to explain what you don't do. I think that is a great question for people to ask when they're recruiting, which is, you say that you do all of these things, but what don't you do? What are the definitions around the boundaries of the work that you do? Because that became super clear when you said we don't do any implementation. There are a lot of firms that would describe themselves as strategy firms where strategy is a sales process for a big piece of implementation, actually. And so I think that is very clarifying for what you're talking about. Okay, now Isobel, over to you. One of the things that we always joke about when we explain to people what consulting is and isn't in our student sessions is that there's always this picture, and I didn't look to see if OC&C has one. If they do, I'm going to link to it in the thing. But there's this picture of an analyst writing on a whiteboard overlooking the city of New York, right? And it's it conveys vision and insight and strategy. And in reality, I can't even remember one day in my whole time at Bain when I did a thing like that, right? And so I know you're laughing, so I know you've seen this picture. If it wasn't at OC&C, it's definitely somewhere else. But right, but can you actually just give us a better specific picture of what it is that you do day to day? When you wake up in the morning, because even when Akshaan was explaining it, it's great, we do high level cerebral strategy. That sounds like thinking. I know it's not just thinking though. So what is it that you're doing? What tools are you using? What are just a couple of the specifics of the day to day? How many engagements are you staffed on? Can you just walk me through a few of those details to try to bring color to your work?
Yeah, absolutely, Jenny. And I was laughing because we do indeed have whiteboards around the office. We are indeed on a floor high up overlooking the New York skyline. So it was ringing true.
Do you ever write on the windows overlooking the city with some kind of sweeping gaze? Tell if you do, I want to be, and especially if it's a regular thing, if it's every morning you have this, window whiteboarding session, then I need you to tell me all about this.
Not quite the windows, but I have been known to have some whiteboarding sessions as a team, so got to set the record straight. Oh dear. But yes, beyond that, so big picture, We as associate consultants at OC&C are staffed on one project at a time, and that continues all the way up to a manager. So associate consultant, AC, consultant, C, and then manager, M, which is great because you really get to commit to one project, one client, drive to a singular answer, and get to know the team really well as well without feeling like you're pulled in multiple directions. At OC&C right now, we are in a model of 3 days in the office a week. So that I find to be a really nice balance. Consulting is so team orientated that I've found it super beneficial to be in person, particularly as an AC, and when you're starting out and just have so many questions and are learning so much, it's really nice to be able to just speak face to face with whoever's managing you, but then also appreciate the flexibility of the 2 days when you want. And those days are determined by the project manager at the time. So very much project dependent and team dependent. And as Akshaan mentioned, these projects are short, of 1 to 2 months. So that is big picture. In terms of kind of overarching structure of a week, and I really think it's a tough question because of how project dependent it is, but I can give an overview of what the kind of layout of the team and project cycle looks like. So every day we'll have morning check-ins with junior team, and it'll be an opportunity for each work stream to align on priorities for the day, key to-dos, and a good chance to see what other members on the team are working on. Now to dig into that.
Can I pause you there for just a second? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, are you going to dig in?
Okay.
I was going to say, like, tell me tactically, like, are you sharing models? Do you bring a slide? Is it informal? Like, yeah, give me a sense of culturally, like, what exactly is happening in these meetings.
So those junior team check-ins are very informal, much more of a conversation, maybe walking through kind of a laid out email of steps or insights that we want to get to, key questions that we want to answer with whatever kind of work stream we're on. So examples of work streams include building out a market model to let the client know what the total addressable market could look like. Or it could be internal analysis, so working in Excel to get some key insights out of their data. It could be conducting a call campaign with customers or experts in the market to really get to some good insights on the lay of the land, the main players, what the future of the space looks like. So multiple different types of roles, and OC&C does a good job of making sure that project to project you are working on these different types of things and building up that skill set in both quant and qual roles. But then the more formal or more formal side comes from the full team meetings that happen roughly twice a week. So that's when you get all senior team as well in a room. That's when you'll get partner feedback to discuss the emerging answers from the research and analysis that's been going on, and a chance to really debate the answer and move the process forwards, which is exciting time. And I would say that's when I've had some whiteboarding time on brainstorming in those full team meetings. And then the final step of that is client touch points and meetings. At OC&C, the client relationship is handled from the manager, so you see less of that day to day, but you're on the big client check-ins and I would say the ebb and flow of the work kind of is determined by the goal of those meetings and the extent of the output that you're presenting and where you are at the project stage.
Give me a breakdown. Oh, yeah. Okay, yes. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other point on what the week could look like, but it's broadening out from the day-to-day project work. Are there various other meetings that you might be a part of? So that could be networks, that could be committees, that could be interest groups. And for example, for Akshaan and I, that includes the green team. So a year ago, when I was a year in, co-founded the US branch of the green team with a fellow co-worker based on my sustainability background and interest. Similarly to Akshaan, I've been working in social impact kind of oriented smaller startups before thinking about consulting, and was really drawn to having that broader business exposure kind of starting off my career, but really wanted to see if I could draw in that interest at OC&C, and was very struck by the support from senior team in terms of setting that up. And now we have regular meetings to think about how to increase awareness within the firm. And I would say that that is something that I found really valuable in how junior team and junior staff at OC&C are encouraged to shape life outside of project work. So we've got a book club, we've got a wine club started by ACs and Cs recently. And it's a lot of fun and there's a lot going on.
I love it.
I realized that was a lot.
No, that was great. I have two follow-up questions. One is critically important.
Okay.
You mentioned that y'all are in the office 3 days a week. Is there a house in the Hamptons that people share? You got to tell me, right? Because I just am imagining that part of the structure of that, when you were like, it varies by project and varies by season, is like a Wednesday night trip out to the Hamptons. True or not true? Tell me what's going on.
No house in the Hamptons, devastatingly. We recently did have a charity auction with a house out in Colorado, so that is part of the agenda, but not quite the daily trip.
Yeah. Maybe there should be a committee about that. I'm gonna recommend, a social committee, a weekend committee, or a long weekend committee, something like this. You can attribute it back to me when you get in trouble for that kind of thing. Go ahead, Akshaan. You were gonna weigh in.
I was gonna say my peer group were like 16 of us, and we attempted to pitch in together and bid for that house. Unfortunately didn't win it, but the partner has graciously seen our attempt to bid for it and was quite taken back. So I think we may have something in the works for a weekend trip.
All right. Well, this is going to be, this is journalistic reporting at its best, right? We have to really dive into this. No, but on a more serious note, Isobel, so as you were describing everything, I feel like I got a good sense of how maybe your calendar would break down. But can you just tell me, as a percentage of time allocation on a given week, what percent is meetings? What percent is Excel? What percent is like customer facing? What percent is PowerPoint? I know that it's going to have to be a gross generalization and it could change, but if you could just give me kind of a high level breakdown, I think that would help people a lot understand what that looks like.
Yeah, of course. So I think the meetings that I spoke about in terms of those check-ins and then full team meetings of the main ones. So maybe that's 20 to 30% day dependent. Then I would say that it really does depend on the work stream that you're on. So if it's an Excel work stream, then the majority of your time is spent in that analysis, particularly as a junior to mid AC. But one thing that maybe we can touch upon is how the role changes within the AC journey, because it definitely looks very different for me now. 2 years on, I'm spending way less of my time kind of in the depths of the crunch of the analysis than I was a few months ago, a year ago. So yeah, majority of time on kind of the analysis, but then also now that has changed a little bit towards more thinking about answer development for me.
Okay, love that. Amazing. All right, well, Akshaan, back to you. So can you explain one of you mentioned, I think, 12 engagements. That's a huge number in a year. So if you can even remember them all, right? If you could share one that was memorable for you. And again, I'm looking for some of the details. Here are a few examples, right? How you guys mentioned the team size. but like who specifically was on the team? Were any of them staffed by expertise, or was it all kind of generalist? How was the project structured? Did you know upfront how many weeks it was going to be and when the deadlines were going to be for key deliverables? What kind of analysis did you perform? And then, at the end, tell me kind of the fun part of the story, which is, if you think about the car stories everybody tells in an interview, right? Like the context is the setup, the action is what y'all did, and then the results are like, how did the client receive it? How did it impact what the client did? So just describe it in those 3 ways.
Absolutely. Very interesting question. If I have to pick a project, I'm going to pick one that just sort of the first one that sort of immediately stood out to me as being memorable. It was a merger of 2 media businesses that we were hired to consult and advise on. I have to be a bit vague about the project overview for confidentiality reasons, but I can talk very specifically about, the kind of work I did. And I think it was memorable for sort of 3 main reasons. One was the level of ownership I felt on that project. Second was the type of work I was doing and, the specific work stream. And the third is the team that I was on and the team environment. So as to the level of ownership, I felt like this was sort of midway into the year. And I felt like I was really driving the answer, at least part of that answer, to the question of, is this merger a good idea? Will it be beneficial for the firm, for the consumers, for the platform contributors? And it's a really cool sort of sense of responsibility you have when you have like partners and managers and people who've been in the business for 20 years listening to your advice and then actually taking that into consideration as part of an answer driving strategy. And then on the actual work I was doing, there's 2 big phases of my work stream. The first was a survey of consumers of the media business. And so the objective was to sort of understand these consumer groups and estimate the level of overlap between them, and then understand if the merged entity would actually be something that they're looking for and that they would be interested in doing. And I've always really liked surveys. Have never had the opportunity to crunch them until this job, which was quite interesting. And then the second was to speak. This is what we generally call the interview work stream. And it involves speaking with experts and executives. And in this case, we were talking to executives at similar media firms in the US and around the world who had been through mergers of a similar scale to understand, what are the learnings we can take away from that? Were they a good idea? What were the pitfalls? What were the benefits? And then we had to condense these learnings from dozens of calls and research into like an easily understandable deck for a board of directors meeting, which I think in the analogy would be sort of the high point climax of the project, because while it was intimidating, it was also a very memorable experience. And I think ultimately it ended up being, we did end up recommending it, the merger. TBD on the remaining details.
Amazing. Okay. Again, when we check back on the Hamptons house, we can check back in on this specific project. Maybe the results will be public at that point. Love it. That was great. Thank you so much. So now let's go back to you, Isobel. You mentioned already before that you've been with the firm, that your responsibilities have changed. I just wanted to ask 2 follow-up questions to that. The first one was, can you just talk about the promotion timeline? How long are you expected to be in each role? And then also whether or not and when, if ever, you become industry specific or business problem specific.
Yeah, absolutely. So that last point first, on specificity, that doesn't happen until the manager level is when you are officially aligned with a sector. So our staffing director does a great job of taking into account what industries you've been working on, what kinds of roles, project to project, as an AC and a C, and really trying to distribute that experience that you get to get a good flavor of everything, which is fun because sometimes I guess you're not expecting to enjoy a project as much as necessarily it happens if you've gone into it kind of expecting to align to one sector straight away. On the point about the timeline, I do think consulting is helpful in that there is that kind of structured stage step process. So it's nice to know where you're heading and what kind of development looks like. The way that OC&C does it is that we have a rigorous kind of review feedback process every 6 months. And there's a skills matrix as an associate consultant that you're given feedback on. And once you are ready to move on to that consultant level, then that's when it happens. Typically that it takes about 2.5 years, but some people move through it faster and for some it takes a little longer, so flexibility there. I will pause there, but also happy to talk about the changing role.
No, I think ultimately, basically what you're saying is it's fairly clear. When you come in, you kind of know what to expect and when the roles are going to change. Is that right? Okay, I think that's super helpful for people to understand. Sometimes, again, this is the stuff that is vaguely discussed beforehand, but is a little bit harder to tease out the actuality of it.
Yeah. But I would also say that kind of ahead of the role changing, I mean, the last 2 years, the role has changed so much for me and it keeps it super exciting, challenging. The learning curve is always super steep. And I think the amount of responsibility and ownership that you get from one project to the next is very rewarding, as Akshaan mentioned. And I've definitely seen that kind of 2 years in, as I touched upon before, now instead of kind of focusing on the execution and the analysis itself and spending all the time on kind of the calls or in the Excel analysis, my role is more around kind of zooming out and thinking about structuring the approach that we're going to take on each work stream, and then handing that over to whoever I'm managing, which is a fun part of it as well. So really kind of thinking about the answer and what key insights we need, how we're going to get there. And then, it's very fun when if you're delivering that in a client meeting and if the client has any questions, you can jump in on the work stream that you've been working on. So I've definitely seen that progress in the last couple of years.
Okay, I love that. Well, Akshaan, since you're a little newer to the beat, right? Tell us just a little bit about what your role has been like in this first year and maybe how it's changed from the first project to now.
That's a great question. It's changed very significantly, is what I will say. And it's been a very constant, regular process of change. Literally through every project, I think when you look back, you can pinpoint places and areas of change. I think when you start out, especially the first few months, a lot of what you're doing is learning on you're always learning on the job, but at that point everything is new, and so your first few months on the job, when you're on an interview work stream, you are responsible for taking notes and getting conclusions from those interviews and sharing that with the team, and then on Excel work streams, for example, you have a lot more support from your direct manager as you're going through the process. But then very quickly, even 6 months into the job, on Excel work streams, you have the opportunity to take a lot more ownership. And you're sort of driving that analysis and that answer and really just relying on your direct manager for certain occasions. Excitingly, on my last project was the first time I had complete ownership of the interview work stream. And so what that means is when on my first project, I was doing a lot of notes and sort of sharing summaries with the team. On this last one, I was sort of leading those interviews, asking questions, developing the kind of questions we want to ask, and sort of being on the front lines of that part of the job. And I know, as Isabella said, and I've heard from other colleagues who are now 2 years in and 3 years in, that it's a constant dynamic change process, which I find very exciting.
I love that. So just one story from back in the day, in the glory days when I was, an AC at Bain. I had one moment when I can think through, like an Excel work stream early to an Excel work stream later. Like one of my early points of feedback was you can't hard code data into your Excel worksheets. Can you think of a point of feedback on an earlier work stream that helped you, gain ownership, something that was kind of like, now it feels maybe obvious to you, but it was actually really helpful and insightful for you earlier on that helped you be ready to take full ownership now?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, this is to do with interviews when we do a lot of that. I distinctly remember taking about an hour to an hour and a half to write the summary for a 45-minute interview that we had, and to be able to share that around with the team and the partners. And now on my last project, we were doing like 3 to 4 calls a day. And I was, putting the summaries from each of those calls in about like 10 or 15 minutes after that call on the full Teams chat, like to share with partners and managers. And that transition, I think, stands out to me as being very, very big.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that they were grateful to you for the difference. I love it. Amazing. For both of you or either of you, tell me about a high point of each week for you. If there's something out of what you do that you've mentioned that you really enjoy, whether it's in the office, whether it's kind of adjacent to the core work that you do, whether it's client interaction or something else, is there something that you look forward to specifically? Like, is it like a specific kind of breakfast cereal? Like, give me the details, right? I want to get really into the weeds here.
So we're talking about the espresso machine in the cafe, is what I'm hearing. Straight into the first thing.
I'm not trying to lead the questions. I'm just trying to lead the questions. That's all I'm trying to do here.
That is the high point of the day. Yeah. But I would also say, other than the coffee, is I think what I've found that what I wasn't necessarily expecting was the focus on building relationships with coworkers, not just in your peer group and with the people who you joined with, but also both more senior and then as you progress a little, who more junior than you as well. And the breadth of those perspectives is something that I found super helpful. So when you join, you get a buddy who joined a year before you, and that's a great option just to answer and to ask all of the minute questions, and really a great kind of touch point as you're finding your feet. But even 2 years in, my buddy relationships above me are still really important. My buddies now moved to London, to our London office, and we're still in close contact. So really appreciate the kind of extent of those relationships. And now I have buddies who have joined after me, which is really fun as well, to go on regular coffee chats with them and check-ins. And then the other part of that are the mentors that you get. So that is someone who, when you join as a junior AC, will be in the consultant role. And it's an opportunity to have regular check-ins on kind of broader career development goals and to review feedback and development requests from prior projects and really get that kind of more very thoughtful feedback based on their past experiences that I found very valuable as I am kind of progressing in the role.
Love it. Most important question though, Akshaan, before you, what button do you press on the machine? Like what's your order?
I go for the big coffee rather than, but we do have an Italian contingent in our office who are all about the espresso shots. So,
but you're Americano. Yeah. Okay. Love it. Awesome. Akshaan, what about you? What's your high point?
That's a great question. I think I got two things that I really look forward to on a weekly basis. One is sort of just separate from project work. And it's the, Isobel touched on this a bit before, it's the Book and Wine Club that recently started at work. It's been about like 6 months now.
Oh, you guys said book club and wine club. You didn't say book and wine club. That's a whole different club.
That was actually just a collab event recently. It's usually a very separate experience.
Different customer segments.
Exactly. There is more overlap than you would think, I think. But
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, at our wine club, we've got like we've got a sort of lot of consultants who actually joined from our global offices. And recently we've got quite a few from our Italian and French office. And that makes wine club particularly interesting because there's always a lively debate between these two contingents, and I'm just sitting on the side enjoying every bit of it.
My family and my husband and I are in the diligence process to buy a winery in California, so we might have to like get an in. Wow. You know, if you know somebody who knows somebody, I'm just saying we might need y'all to include our wine in this spicy conversation.
Ooh,
that would be exciting. Yeah. And from a project perspective, really quickly, I think my highlight is definitely the team share, which is like a weekly sort of 30-minute informal meeting we have with junior team. It's just a great opportunity and like a very non-judgmental, like open space to talk about the challenges and the highlights of the week, and really learn about what your managers have felt and what your sort of direct managers and peers are feeling about the project in their weeks.
I love it. Amazing. The next piece is just a point of wisdom, right? When people are recruiting, tell us about something that they should do or should not do to help to, ensure their more likely success in the process at OC&C.
Akshaan, over to you.
Yeah. I found that I think it's important to stress that my experience having prior consulting experience is definitely not a necessity, like internships and that kind of thing. I think the thing that sets candidates apart, and the thing I've noticed from talking to colleagues and other people who are actually at OC&C, is you have to be passionate about your past experiences and sort of be able to convey that passion and intellectual curiosity. And it can be about just about anything, any kind of experience. But because we are really ultimately a very intellectually diverse firm, I feel like, with people just from very interesting backgrounds. And so being able to talk about the difference you've made and the actual things you've done through your work experience in college, in whatever field that is, I think leaves a memorable impact to your interviewer and the people you end up speaking to at the firm.
Love that.
Yeah.
Isobel, what about you?
I completely agree. And I think off the back of that, kind of being able to relate or connect any kind of past experience to commercial insight on a case is something that definitely is valued by OC&C. I fully echo everything Akshaan said in terms of that diversity of approach and thinking. And I think in a case, it is great to show that willingness to engage in a conversation style with whoever's interviewing you, and taking kind of the answer, being very answer-led, but also discussing the thought process, the way that you've got there, and being clear and enthusiastic is super beneficial.
Love that. Okay. And then last question, just about the kind of next steps before we, of course, wrap up with our fun questions. Don't forget. How do you recommend interested candidates engage? We've already talked about kind of how they should be, what they should say, what the kind of things are that you're looking for, but just tactically, like when should they be talking to y'all? Who should they be talking to? Should they be talking to anybody? Blind resume drops, fine, not fine. Like give us the skinny, right? Advise the people, tell the people what you want.
I'm happy to kick this one off. So if you're interested, on the handshake page for OC&C, there are a ton of info sessions, coffee chats, case workshops, and I think those are a really great way of learning more about the firm and if it is going to be the right fit for you and if it's something that you'd like to engage with more. So that is a great way to get involved. I would say that LinkedIn outreach is very much not needed, and it's such a busy time of year. It's very easy for these things to slip through the gaps. Really kind of that one-to-one networking is very much not a requirement. There are coffee chats available if you see those, but definitely wouldn't put too much pressure on those. And there's always our recruitment coordinators email on both the OC&C website as well if you want to reach out and ask any questions or be connected to anyone at the firm.
Awesome. From either of your experience, did you just apply blind? Did you do a coffee chat? What did you do personally?
I know we've had, Isobel and I have had different experiences, so that's actually a great question. For me, it was I applied basically blind. I hadn't really at that point I wasn't actually I would have loved to go for the coffee chats and those info sessions, but wasn't as aware of them. At the time, OC&C wasn't doing on-campus recruiting at Brown, and it was just luck of the draw that I heard about them, found out that they were doing interviews, and that's just how it happened.
And I did them all. So
that's great. I mean, that's what the people want to know, y'all. That's what they want to know. Do them or don't do them. There's a pathway for you.
Yeah, not one right way, exactly.
I love it. Well, great. Well, just as we conclude, we'll do these ping pong style. So Akshaan, I'll let you go first, and then Isobel, you can follow up for each one of them. So I've got 3 final, just personal questions. Short answers are great for this. The first one is your favorite moment or memory from your time at OC&C.
It's gotta be the 1 week international training week, or ITW as we call it, which was in Lisbon, Portugal, in August of last year. It was basically my second week at the firm, and it was, from a welcome dinner to a gala. I think the gala dinner at the Botanical Gardens in particular has got to be one of my most favorite memories from the last year at the firm.
If you're on Instagram, you're just blowing up Instagram. Right?
100%.
Yeah. I love it. What about you, Isobel?
And for me, it's the away weekends that the US office, and actually all the offices across the firm have, but much less training involved. So this year we went to Portland, Maine. So a seafood lover's dream, really lovely weekend. And last year was Puerto Rico, and my friends couldn't believe that I was going with work. And yeah, a great opportunity to get to see an amazing place and explore and spend more time with coworkers outside of project work.
I love that. I've never been to Puerto Rico. It's on my list. I love it. Next one is your hidden talent.
I've got to give COVID credit for this one, because I was locked at home for like 6 months and I got way too into the game Settlers of Catan, which is a board game that I think very few people know, but hopefully the people who know will know it.
Oh no,
that's my
people who
hidden
know, but also they will fear you now. So there's the added benefit. I love that. Isobel, what about you?
And for me, I would say that this might not be hidden from some select co-workers who have seen this at holiday parties, but when it comes to karaoke, I am all in, fully commit. I will be on the mic.
Amazing. I have a place in the Dominican Republic that would really like to see you.
Ooh.
So, if your schedule allows, we can connect offline. Last one, strangest food you've ever tried.
I really thought about this one. I think it's got to be civet coffee, which is describe. It's sort of made from coffee beans, evacuated by Asian civet cats. But as glamorous as it sounds,
it's poop coffee, right? Poop
yeah,
coffee,
it's poop coffee. Is what it is. It just tasted like regular coffee, though. For anyone,
that's what everybody says. But it's like it's like $300 an ounce or something crazy like that, right?
It's very cheap in Asia, and so luckily I didn't have to splurge. But yes.
That reminds me of I kind of wonder if it's this kind of marketing thing, but at my university, there were these dorm rooms that were like unheated, uncooled, and don't have an indoor bathroom because they were built in the 1800s. And so the university created this like competitive application to try to get people to live there. And now they're like the most prestigious place to live, even though they're like absolutely the worst accommodation. I feel like Civet Coffee like did that at some point. They were like, you know what you could do to like something nobody would ever buy otherwise, but like it's like a specialty item. Anyhow, y'all can do a project on that and report back to me. Isobel, what about you? Strangest food you've ever eaten?
I have sampled crickets. So insects, high in protein, nice and crunchy. Wouldn't know what you were eating. Would recommend.
Was that for a client project? Were you doing a market entry case? Tell me the truth.
Watch this space.
I love it. Amazing. Well, nobody asked me, but I'll offer mine too. I ate a fried tarantula, also in Asia. I feel like you if you want to eat food to like win a never have I ever game or something like that, then I feel like that's the place to go. But there was this like rest stop for a very uncomfortable bus that they all stopped at, and there were people that were walking around, and their marketing tactic was they put a tarantula on your back, which I feel like is like a really unfortunate introduction to the tarantula. And I'm not sure that it made me want to eat it, but it definitely did get my attention. And so I was like, what is that? And then afterwards, you could buy a basically like a grilled or a fried tarantula. And so I was like, I mean, when in your life are you going to have the chance to do this? So maybe, Isobel, your company that you maybe or maybe didn't look at the cricket market for can like talk about some adjacencies. You know what I'm saying? Just think about it.
How did it taste, Jenny? Would you recommend the experience?
Just like chicken. Yeah. No, just kidding. Thankfully, it was fairly crispy. I wouldn't eat it on a regular basis, but it wasn't something that I was regretted eating. I was like, once is fine though. Once is fine. Yeah. So anyhow, thank you both for joining. Really enjoyed this conversation. Hope that you had a lot of fun as well. I feel like we got a lot of color into the excitement and the detail of your life and your work at OC&C. We'll put a bunch of the things and the resources, Isobel, especially that you recommended, into the show notes so that folks can follow along with those as well. And so thank you again for your time. Thanks for your generosity. And thank you for coming on and sharing your insights with everyone today.
Thank you so much, Jenny. It was an amazing time.
Thank you for having us.